Good morning. More progress has been made in the talks between Russian and American advisors in Riyadh, and I'm going to report on that, as well as some other breaking developments, Southwest Asia, suppression of freedom of speech in the United States on our campuses. Today is Wednesday, March 26th, and yesterday, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov gave an interview on Channel 1 in Russian television where he said that the Russian diplomats tried to convey to their American colleagues one simple thing: Russia cannot take Kiev at its word, since the words of the Ukrainian leadership have no weight. He said Moscow would need clear security guarantees in the event of the resumption of the Black Sea Initiative, or the so-called grain deal. That's what they were discussing today, which the Ukrainians have violated on more than one occasion. He said, we're talking about an international agreement between Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations, which involves the export of grain from Ukrainian ports through the Black Sea. Further, he said that in general, the Kremlin supports the resumption of the Black Sea Initiative, but it should be modified into a more acceptable form for everyone so that there are no ambiguities. Now, he also said that he thinks, judging from his viewing of the interview that Tucker Carlson conducted with Steve Witkoff, that Witkoff does have a good understanding of the situation, but Lavrov said that Witkoff overestimates the Europeans. I'm sure Helga Zepp-LaRouche would agree with that. If anyone like a complete pack of lunatics, including the British discussions of their nuclear Trident submarines being capable of taking out 40 cities, etc., and the Germans gearing up for hundreds of billions of euros of military buildup for which they don't have the industry nor the energy if they can continue in this insane way. And that was discussed on my symposium with Paul Gallagher. Now, also, I will say that the Ukrainians have demonstrated that they are not trustworthy partners, even after the agreed upon truce on targeting energy-related facilities, which include nuclear power plants, oil and gas refineries, and other kinds of facilities. The Ukrainians launched a drone attack at the Caspian Pipeline Consortium in Krasnodar. The drone was shot down by the Russians, but again, I think demonstrating that Ukrainians are not reliable partners. So the Russians are insisting that there must be a means of verifying this. For his part, apparently Zelensky gave a press conference yesterday saying that he supports the idea of the ceasefire on energy targets. We'll see if he keeps his word or how this will be enforced and verified. Otherwise, I think of optimistic note is that the DNI, that is Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, has released their annual threat assessment that, and I'll read it, quote, "We continue to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2023, unquote." And the report, according to our sources who read it, continues on that moderate tone. So why are we bombing Yemen? What is going on with this? And speaking of Yemen, people probably heard about this very bizarre story, which I have to say still doesn't really make sense to me, but the White House confirmed that the signal thread was real. Somehow an aide, supposedly, to National Security Advisor Mike Waltz invited this really slimy anti-Trump, pro-Israeli former IDF soldier journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, who was a big proponent of the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction theory to invade Iraq, onto a signal thread where they were discussing the military action against Yemen 2 hours before it occurred. Jeffrey Goldberg released the story, supposedly not all of the details. It just still seems bizarre, but perhaps this will blow over. I'm not sure where it's going or what more there is to that story. Now, otherwise, in the United States, there continues to be an outrageous crackdown on dissent on the campuses of students who oppose the ongoing genocidal campaign being conducted by the Israelis against the people in the West Bank and in Gaza. The co-producer of the No Other Land, a Palestinian, Hamdan Balal, was beaten severely and then abducted and taken into Israeli captivity. He was released today. Another journalist recently was killed, and people who have been on my symposium and worked with Jose Vega, Dr. Mark Perlmutter, Dr. Feroz Sidwa, who are leading the Doctors Against Genocide, were in a hospital when it was bombed by the Israelis. So that is not letting up. But if you say that it is genocide, then you are accused of being anti-Semitic. And even if you have a green card or are a permanent resident, you can be deported. I'm happy to report that a judge has at least temporarily blocked the deportation of a young Korean American student. She has a green card. She moved to the United States when she was 7 years old. She's a class valedictorian. She attended an anti-genocide rally sometime last fall. ICE was trying to deport her. That's been stopped, but others have been fleeing to Canada and are hiding. So this is quite ominous and not a good take. Robert Kennedy Jr. somehow has decided or been forced to say that anti-Semitism on the campuses falls under the purview of the Department of Health and Human Services. And he put out a post on X saying, quote, "Instead of inspiring universal condemnation, the October 7th Holocaust triggered a global wave of anti-Semitism. Ivy League campuses became a greenhouse for poison." Well, if the Israelis hadn't killed 60, 80, 100, 180,000 Palestinians in the wake of that, probably there would not be so much talk about the crimes being committed by the Netanyahu regime, which, by the way, has nothing to do with being anti-Semitic. It's just true. And hundreds of thousands of people in Israel are protesting him and his moves to shut down the judicial process and to keep himself out of jail, even at the risk of the lives of the remaining hostages. Kennedy goes on to praise Columbia University for capitulating to this and helping to locate students who are going to be deported. Kennedy writes, "I'm glad Columbia has agreed to this first step and will begin to restore itself as the garden of tolerance, reason, compassion, and respect." Now, he doesn't mention the fact that in the School for International and Public Affairs, which is headed by a quote unquote former Mossad agent, Israeli Defense Forces intelligence agent Karen Yarhi Milo, you have some of the worst war criminals, Hillary Clinton, Mike Pompeo, and Victoria Nuland. And I can't imagine that anyone watching this would want your child to grow up to be like any of those people. So again, the fact that we finally have an ongoing dialogue between the United States and Russia is the first step to securing a more stable situation. The Middle East crisis, war, can only be resolved in the context of a new security and economic architecture, which is shaped by the United States, Russia, and China working together, and also India. Hopefully, we are moving in that direction and not toward a war with Iran, which would be a colossal mistake since both China and Russia have been doing joint military exercises with Iran and have close relations with that nation. So I would encourage people to watch this space, the LaRouche organization. Tune in later today for Helga's webcast. On Friday is the International Peace Coalition call, and Friday night at 7 p.m. my symposium has a new time. So the process between the U.S. and Russia is proceeding. Southwest Asia remains extremely dangerous, disturbing, and alarming. And the backdrop of it all is the insanity of the economic policy and going with stable coins, bitcoins, and cryptocurrency, when what we really need to do is put Wall Street and the City of London through an orderly bankruptcy reorganization, with the Glass-Steagall Act being reinstated, as Lyndon LaRouche would say. So have a wonderful day. Keep fighting. Like, subscribe, share, and donate to the LaRouche organization.